started, I first have a administrative announcement for Physics 494. So it's for like 12 of you in the big sea of people we have here today. But those of you in Physics 494, we meet in this room a week from today. That is not a What Physicists Do meeting. This is the final What Physicists Do of the semester, but we will meet in this room for Physics 494 for our last discussion and grade check. Okay, we'll go through all of that material for Physics 494 in this room in 1 week's time. So with that said, I'd like to welcome you to the final What Physicists talk of the semester of fall 2016. Our speaker today is Dr. Wim Leemans, who's the director of the Accelerator Technology and Applied Physics Division at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. His bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and applied physics is from Brussels, Belgium, and his PhD is from UCLA. That's in EE and plasma physics. He formed LOACES, the Laser Optics and Accelerator Studies group at Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. It's now known as BELA. And with that group, he's built a petawatt laser and has produced 4 giga-electron volts electrons. Very impressive engineering there. He's a fellow of the American Physical Society. He's a member of the IEEE and the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Amongst his many awards was a recent citation, an achievement award from the Department of Energy, the Energy Secretary's Achievement Award. Just as a personal note, I've been asking for Dr. Leemans to come because of this discussion of making smaller and smaller accelerators, particle accelerators, and the way he's going to talk about practical uses of them. I thought that's been a great topic to bring to Sonoma State. It's interesting, I so much wanted to bring him in, and then I went to look, oh, has he spoken in the series before? He was literally the last person to speak in this series before I arrived. So it's taken me a couple of years to get Dr. Leemans to come and speak in the series, but that's because he was just here, in some sense, in 2007. But that fall I arrived, and I said, you know, let's bring on people like Dr. Wim Leemans. Of course, he had just spoken. So let's give a warm welcome to a very prestigious speaker.
So thank you for the kind introduction, and also for Scott's persistence in getting me out here. It's always a pleasure to come to this lovely campus, and I obviously am very happy that there's so many people coming. I know some of you need to be here, but I hope I will entertain you and give you at least a memorable hour. So I will talk about solving big problems with small accelerators. And my talk will cover sort of different parts. We are funded by the Department of Energy to think about the next generation colliders. But we're also working on medical devices, and depending on my time, I will certainly mention to you a medical device that we hope one day will actually be able to enter the body. The accelerator will enter the body and irradiate tumors right there where it matters, rather than beaming particles through the body at the tumor. So it sounded 5 years ago like a completely crazy idea, but we're making good progress on it. So let me start with accelerators. They come in many sizes and energies. Some of you in the room may still remember this type of accelerator. It's called a television. It operates at about 10 kiloelectron volts. Some go up to 20 kiloelectron volts. It is a particle accelerator, and you steer the beam and you write an image. You also, if you go to the dentist, there's another little accelerator there that is used to produce dental X-rays. Going up a little bit in energy, you have a 15 MeV Linacs. These are used in industry. These are used in medical applications here. And then, of course, you have the bigger machines. This is a 150 meter circumference machine. It's a synchrotron where X-rays get produced. This one happens to be at Berkeley Lab. If you go to the Berkeley area and you look up the hill, you will see this dome here. This is where Lawrence, the founder of our lab, built his last accelerator. The 184-inch cyclotron used to be in there. Now it's one of the premier X-ray sources in the world. At SLAC, they used to have a 2-mile LINAC, linear accelerator, which brought particles up to 50 GeV. And then, of course, the flagship of our community is at CERN, is a big round machine that produces proton beams at up to 7 TeV, tera electron volt, for discovery of new particles and what matter and energy is built from. Now, so if you look at this machine here, we went from this tiny little accelerator that Lawrence held in his hand, and about 80 years later, we are building machines that are the size of a small country, a small European country. And so the question, of course, is, what are we going to do beyond this? These machines are formidable. I apologize for the wrong choice of color here of the font. This is 300 megajoule of stored energy. And to give you a sense of what that means, it's a fast train moving at roughly 100 miles an hour. That's 360 megajoule. Or this aircraft carrier going at 12 knots. So it's really phenomenal what the particle accelerator community has done, going from a handheld device to something that carries that much energy in a pipe going around. You can imagine what it would do if that beam gets steered in the wrong direction. It wouldn't be good. So it's really a big challenge. Now, if you look at what happened in computer world, we went from what was called at the time a supercomputer in 1954 to a handheld device that's far more powerful. And so my career is basically on figuring out, can we do the same to accelerators? Can we make them small again so that we can, again, hold them in our hands? Of course, eventually they'll become too big to do that. But can the same be done with particle accelerators? So you could say, okay, why is an accelerator this big? Why did we need 2 miles at Stanford Linear Accelerator Center to get 50 GeV? So I don't recommend doing this at your house, but if you want to have a friend offer their microwave, I would say put the microwave, put some aluminum foil in there, and have it spark, right? This is, I didn't use my own microwave, I swear. But so what's happening here is the electric fields that you build up in this device are large and are starting to cause discharges. So if you have your 2-mile long LINAC and you're trying to get more energy out of it, then you are running into what we call the breakdown limit into these structures. So you cannot continue to put more power into it, because eventually it will just break down by itself and you won't be able to accelerate electrons anymore. So, but if you can't increase the electric fields in these accelerators, you can't get to higher energy. So the whole idea in our field is, let's imagine instead of using copper structures where you put microwave power in and you're limited because of this breakdown, let's go to a medium that's already ionized, already broken down. And that's called a plasma. And so a plasma can sustain far larger fields, electric and magnetic fields, than you can generate in vacuum without causing these breakdown surfaces. So if you now, let's first assume that we can do this, that we can shrink the accelerator. What I'm showing you here is sort of a roadmap of accelerators. So on this axis here is beam energy, low over here, high over there, and this is beam power. This is in watts or kilowatts or even hundreds of kilowatts. And here this would be in mega electron volt all the way out to tera electron volt. In the upper right hand corner are the colliders. As I mentioned, this 360 megajoule of beam power. This is really phenomenal. So they have a combination of extreme high beam energy and extreme high beam power. In the middle are the light sources. This is the synchrotron, where you produce X-ray beams. They're fairly high beam energy. They go up to, let's say, 8 giga electron volt, 8 billion volt. And then over here you have the medical applications. This is where cancer therapy operates. This is where security applications operate, where they do cargo scanning, where they use gamma ray beams to look at what's inside containers so that the containers that roll into our ports don't contain material that shouldn't be in this container because it could be used for weapons. Industry uses particle accelerators to make the vulcanization, make the grooves in our tires. The shrink wrapping of your turkey that we all bought at Thanksgiving is done with electron beams. Environment, cleaning up of flue gases is done with accelerators. So imagine now that you could shrink the device to such a scale that instead of the user going to the device, like in this case here, or certainly in this case here, that the machine could go to the problem. And that's sort of the core idea behind the development of our technology. And we would like to build, in the first phase, technology that's applicable to medical applications, cargo screening, a little bit of industry, although that's a slightly different technology, and starts to nibble at these light source applications here on the way to colliders. So this is really an important thought. Bring the machine to the problem. Bring the accelerator to where it's needed. So,
Dr. Leemans?
yes?
So in that graph, I mean, the television, the original, you were using this example. It's the lowest energy, the lowest. It's in the far corner there.
Over here.
But you know, it's what's interesting to me, and I want to give this perspective, is that we think of particle accelerators and physics, and everyone's thinking of the colliders, and we're learning new physics.
Right.
But at the lowest energy ends was the ubiquitous technology of the 20th century, was television sets. And you're bringing into, like, I didn't even know about the shrink wrapping has this accelerating electrons, I suppose, to shrink the material.
Yeah. So it's used, these are very high average power linear accelerators. They're typically now technology that was developed in the 50s and 60s and 70s. There's a little bit of new developments here with superconducting radio frequency cavities, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about devices where you actually need beam energy, but typically with our technology we cannot do the high beam power yet. Okay, so the conventional accelerators here, this is an example of a superconducting radio frequency structure that is used, for example, at the new upgrade at Stanford Linear Accelerator Center for the linear coherent light source. But you can look here at the fields that you generate in these structures here. They're typically 10 to 40 million volt per meter or megavolt per meter. And that's why these things are so big. In our field, we produce fields that are easily 1,000 times bigger than what can be stored into these cavities here. And this enabled us a few years ago to use a handheld device. I just realized that I forgot to bring it. I should have brought it. But the accelerator really is this big, and it reached 4.3 gigavolts in beam energy. And I'll show you sort of a view graph where I compare that to what you would have to do with conventional technology. And so the real question is, can we master all of this technology for these applications? And one of the key differences between this picture here and this picture here is, here you design, you calculate, you design, you build in a machine shop, you measure it, you put it into your accelerator, and you operate it. And you operate it for years. In our case, we basically make an accelerator structure every laser shot that we fire into our plasma. And so that's really challenging because it's not a piece of copper that you machine. It's a piece of plasma that you machine to do the right things. So I will now talk a little bit about some basic physics, then the experiments that we're doing right now, radiation sources, and then a few words about laser technology. So if you fall asleep during my next 50 minutes of talking, just dream about surfing. Surfing is really the core physics that we are doing here, and I hope my little movie will run. And I would say this is again one of these things that I wouldn't recommend you do, but some people do. So here's this wake. The boat is generating a wake, and this guy is brave enough to surf on that wake. He's going to drop the line pretty soon. And now he's basically controlling his speed in such a way that he stays synchronous with the motorboat. So we are going to do the same, but instead of a lake, we use a plasma, which is a fluid containing electrons and ions. Instead of a boat, we use a laser pulse. And instead of people surfing on the wave, we allow electrons to surf on the wave. So again here, you have the surfer, the boat, and the water. We replace it by electrons, a laser, and plasma. And in our case, the physics really is this intense laser beam comes in to a gas. The front of the laser pulse will ionize the gas, will produce the plasma. And now really the work starts. The laser beam is of such intensity, typically 10 to the 18 to 10 to the 19 watts per square centimeter. The sun is about a kilowatt per square meter. So you can do the math. This is many, many billions and billions of suns that we're focusing down to a spot which is typically about a third of the width of a human hair. Typically a few tens of micron to maybe 50 micron. And so you get tremendous pressure from these photons that you've concentrated in this little volume. And this photon pressure pushes plasma electrons, which are first sitting there surrounded by ions, pushes the plasma electrons out of the way like a snowplow, moving through the snow, pushing all of the plasma electrons out of the way. And what are you leaving behind? The ions, which are the positive charge. Now the positive charge starts pulling the negative charge back, and it accumulates right there. So you have set up a high electron density region and then a high ion density region. What you've done is charge separation, the positives from the negatives. If you remember Gauss's law, you're setting up an electric field between the plus and the minus. And this electric field co-propagates with the laser beam, just like the wake of a boat co-propagates with the boat. Now, there's a lot of details that I'll skim over, but in its simplest form, our accelerator looks like this. You have a gas target coming out of a nozzle, could be a supersonic or sonic gas jet, a puff of gas. Could be hydrogen, helium, nitrogen, whatever you want, or a mix of these gases. You have a donor that gives you a large laser system, or a rich uncle or aunt, or Department of Energy in my case. You buy a big laser, you focus that light onto this gas, the front of the laser pulse ionizes the gas, and then the laser pulse does its magic by exciting this wake. Out comes a laser beam plus an electron beam. You apply some diagnostics, in our case here, a magnetic spectrometer. You use a magnet to deflect the different energies of the electron beams that come out in different directions. And here's an example of a 200 MeV, 200 million electron volt electron beam that was done with a 10 terawatt laser beam in a gas jet that's only 2 millimeters in length. So you could say, well, that's still 10 terawatt. I'll comment about it at the end of my talk. For the medical applications, we're bringing that down now to the 1 terawatt level, which is a laser about the size of this table. Not much bigger than that. So this is really a 200 MeV LINAC would easily be the length of this room, if not twice, with conventional technology. And here the device is really tiny. Now, in the beginning of our field, in the mid-90s to 2003, lasers became more ubiquitous. We all started to produce electron beams. This is the energy of the electron beam, and this is the distribution that looked like an exponential distribution of electrons. And when I joined Berkeley Lab, sort of one of the premier accelerator labs in the world, they knew that our field was doing this, and this was really sort of, who cares? This is a sort of, to be frank, one of my colleagues called it plasma vomit, to give you a calibration of how they felt about our results. that this is really just a spray of electrons coming out. But I showed you here, this is a beam of electrons. So what changed? So this is where we were up until 2003. So to answer that question, let me take a step back and think again about how do electrons get energy in these fields? It's a very simple equation. The work done by the field on the particle is the longitudinal electric field times the length over which that field acts on the particle. So I told you that we're using these laser beams and we focus them tightly. Now if you think about what I also said about the spot size, let's take a 10 micron spot size, and you focus a 10 micron spot size, the length over which that light is actually intense enough to cause this large photon pressure is of the order of a couple hundred microns. So I can generate 10 to 100 gigavolt per meter, but my accelerator will only be a couple hundred micron. So I won't be able to reach high energies. So what do we have to do? We have to beat the fraction of the light. So what we embarked on back in the 90s is devices that would guide laser pulses over extended distances to ensure that you could accelerate over long distances. Basically an optical fiber. But I also told you we were working with 10 to the 18 to 10 to the 19 watts per square centimeter. If you put that in an optical fiber, I can guarantee you it'll blow up the fiber in the first shot. The glass will just be blown to smithereens. We built optical fibers out of plasma. So that's an important limitation called diffraction. The second one is, if you look at that surfer, if you think about that surfer is keeping synchronism with the boat, right? In our case, the light pulse, the laser pulse, actually goes slightly slower than the vacuum speed of light inside the plasma. It's a property of the plasma. So the motorboat is not going at the full speed of light, but just a little bit slower. So what do you think is going to happen to the electrons as they accelerate? They're going to start catching up with the laser. And eventually, it's like a surfer sliding down the wave and coming into an uphill part of the wave, starting to decelerate. We call that particle dephasing. The third thing you have to worry about is when your laser beam goes through your structure, it depletes, it pumps energy into the structure. Eventually, your laser pulse will no longer have enough energy to continue doing that. That's called depletion. So the first one is diffraction. So you could focus tightly, or you could say, well, I'll just focus a little softer, so that the Rayleigh ranges, or the range of the light over which it stays intense is longer. Yes, but then you need a bigger laser. Or you make an optical waveguide out of plasma, and this is what we embarked on. And so this is basically a structure where you make sure that there is less plasma on axis and more plasma off axis. It's like a parabolic profile that you're generating. Why is that? Because the index of refraction of a plasma is less than 1. Vacuum is 1. In plasma, it's less than 1. So if you have a laser front that starts diffracting out, curving out, basically the center of your wavefront propagates at a slower speed than the wings of your wavefront, and your laser beam stays collimated. And that's how these plasma waveguides work. So, and then the surfing, with the dephasing here, if you are clever and you make sure that your surfers start here, they ride down the wave, and by the time they're starting to decelerate, if you can truncate your accelerator right there, all the surfers have arrived at the same speed. You'll get a nice electron beam coming out. And that's exactly what we did, all of these elements. So in 2004, my group and 2 other groups, one in England, one in France, almost simultaneously with slightly different approaches. We used the plasma fibers. They used bigger spot sizes. We published, and this is a simulation that was done by my student at the time, Cameron Geddes. We reached the cover of Nature for what was called the Dream Beam, with a 100 MeV electron beam from a gas jet. As this experiment was going on, we were building a bigger laser, a 40 terawatt laser. This was done with a 10 terawatt laser. And I teamed up with Oxford University where they had developed these capillary discharges, and I'll say a little bit more about what these are, but these are essentially the equivalent of these little optical fibers made out of plasma. We use our bigger laser, and we reached 1.1 GeV in a structure which was about a little over 1 inch long. A 1 GeV LINAC would take about a football field with conventional technology. We didn't reach the cover of Nature Physics, but we were mentioned on it if you go and look at the issue. So, where are we going with this? So this was a plot that we generated with beam energy versus plasma density. And we started to plot all of the world's results on here. Pretty soon you see this line. And what you realize is the beam energy actually goes up the lower the density of a plasma. So I didn't mention in the beginning, but the Gauss's law thing will tell you that the electric field scales like the square root of the density. So you would tell me, just jack up your density, because you get the larger electric fields. But remember the simple equation, Ez dot L. The dephasing will kill you. Your motorboat will go so slowly in this dense plasma that the surface will rapidly dephase and you won't be able to get the line acceleration. So it actually goes like 1 over the density. So the lower the density, the better the accelerator works. The second thing you have to do is to control the process of surfing. If you want to get a quality electron beam out, you have to control this. So if you look at these guys here, they all reached the same speed here. These are the guys that you would like to have. These are what we call the injected electrons. This guy is completely injected out of phase. I don't have footage of what happened to him, but it must not be a very pleasant experience. But this is what we are trying to control in these waves in the plasma. So oftentimes I get the question, you've told us about the fields that you generate and that they get energy, but where do the surfers come from? So the surfers are actually background electrons that see this laser pulse come around, and they get hit, and here's a laser beam, and most of them get pushed out of the way and stream past it in these complicated surface lines, but some of them actually get sucked back into this cavity here where the ions are, and these are the ones that we accelerate. So they're actually background electrons that are in the right phase of getting accelerated. So they actually get turned around and form this little beam. So how do you control this process then? Well, a number of years ago there was an interesting paper in the late 90s that has a lot of the physics similar to a wave arriving on the beach. So if you're sitting on the beach and you see a wave rolling in, as the shoreline goes up, eventually the wave amplitude rises and the wave falls over. That's called wave breaking. And so it's by changing the speed of the wave and the amplitude of the wave that you get this breaking of the wave. So it turns out that we can do the same in our plasmas. And so we have now developed technology that allows us to put little bumps in density on the plasma to artificially create wave breaking. So what I'm showing you here is a laser beam coming into a density profile. This is now longitudinal. I told you about our transverse shaping. This is now longitudinally. You generate this cavity, but no electrons get trapped. Here you start getting the electrons trapped. And what do you see? This distance here is much shorter in this case than here. What you've done is you've dropped the plasma density, which controls the length of the accelerating bucket, and you've made this accelerating bucket all of a sudden much slower in velocity so that the surface can jump into the bucket and actually get accelerated. So just like a surfer has to watch the pace at which the wave comes at it, these electrons were watching it, and when the wave slowed down, they were able to catch it. So we built a device like this, where we have a discharge running here, and then a little miniature few hundred micron little jet that came in, and it allowed us to turn the beam from 30 MeV all the way out to 400 MeV with really good control. by playing around with the parameters here in the jet and the parameters here in this structure here where the plasma is running. So this is just to give you a sense of, this all looks impossible to control all of this, but we're managing to guide laser pulses, we're managing to longitudinally control the plasmas to induce traffic. More recently, we've played another trick on this shaping, and what I'm going to show you here is a result of a simulation where we created a density profile like this here. This is a millimeter, and this is the density profile. And what I'm going to show you is a laser beam entering this density profile, coming up the ramp, and right there is where the phase velocity gets changed, and where you will see traffic. So there's the laser pulse. You now start seeing the wake getting stronger, but no electrons get trapped. And as soon as it reaches, there comes a beam. So this is a way of, again, creating this rock on the beach over which the water wave breaks. So you can say, well, but how are you going to make this in the lab? It turns out it's actually very simple. You take your gas jet, and now you put a razor blade into the gas jet. And that razor blade causes a shock, which you can measure with another laser beam on what we call a phase front sensor. This is part of our adaptive optics technology here. And so you can control actually the shape of this plasma very precisely by the control of this razor blade into this flow of the gas. And one of my students did a beautiful experiment where she took the gas jet and then rotated the gas jet angle with respect to the blade. And this is the plasma, and you can see here the shock, the transition between the dark red and the yellow. And as the blade position gets pushed more into the jet, you can actually see that this shock rotates from going to the left to straight to this direction. And by doing that, you create density profiles in the plasma that look very similar to what I showed you in the simulations. And this is what results by changing the blade position. You can control the energy from about a 35 MeV electron beam all the way out to 160 MeV electron beam out of a little gas jet. So these are experiments that are actually very straightforward to do.
Dr. Leemans, I just want to have a context for this. I was thinking that as you were setting this up, I'm trying to get whether or not it's just collecting, it's creating the brake collects it. So if you want to have some efficiency of accelerating electrons, you want this brake in it.
Yes.
Is this brake also important to that, what do I want to call it, concentration or sort of coherence of their energy, of all the energies being the same as well? That's what I was thinking when you first mentioned it.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So it is indeed to ensure that the surfers all get launched at the same location. That they don't get launched continuously as this laser beam goes through the plasma. That it's only in one spot that you do the trapping. And that causes the electron bunch to emerge with pretty much all the same momentum. So it's really, these are all techniques, and this is very current. We just submitted this paper, so I wanted to give you a sense also of the active research that we're doing. This was just submitted to Physical Review Letters. But essentially, these are all techniques that we're developing right now to try to control this process of shaping the accelerator, shaping the electron bunches, because ultimately for the application, you need a quality bunch. You don't want this exponential distribution, this plasma vomit happening. You want control. And so these are actually also all really fun, relatively simple experiments. Don't tell my PhD student. I guess I'm being recorded, so I better watch out. But this is really exciting stuff. He said this for me. So back to this chart here. I gave you a sense of that we're starting to control the injection process. What are we going to do to get higher energy? In 2006, when we got the GV beam, we went to Department of Energy, and I said, I would like to have a bigger laser. So they said, what are we going to do with this bigger laser? So we're going to build a module that one day will serve as a module for a future collider. So they said, well, work out that concept, at least notionally, and then come back to us. So we did, and we wrote this article in Physics Today, my colleague and I, Eric Essery. And the idea was, okay, let's take our plasma technology, one module, and do what they do in particle accelerators, conventional ones. They daisy chain one module after another. We would power every one of our modules with a new fresh laser pulse because you've depleted your energy. And you hand off electron beam from one module to the next, just like a conventional accelerator. You do the same on the positron end. And within 100 stages, maybe something on the order of 500 meters or so, you would have your electron beam arm, you would have your positron arm, so the whole thing might be a kilometer long eventually. But to do this with conventional technology would easily be a 40 kilometer long linear accelerator. So we built this notional concept and we said, why do we want a big laser? Because we want to demonstrate to you that we can do one module that reaches 10 billion electron volts, 10 giga electron volts. Remember that in 2006 we only had one. So we decided let's go for 10 times more. So fortunately for us, there was in 2009 the stimulus program. We were one of the beneficiaries of a stimulus grant, the ARA grant, and we were able to build this laser here, which is called Bella, Berkeley Lab Laser Accelerator, which is still to date the world's highest repetition rate petawatt system. So this thing here fires 1 petawatt, so 10 to the 15 watts on targets at a repetition rate of 1 shot per second. Lasers of this peak power typically fire once every half hour, a few times a day. We do it once a second. This gives you a sense of the laser, beam propagation, target chamber, and the back of the beam dump. And you can say, well, wait a minute, this is not a tabletop system anymore, and I grant you that. This is, the length here is about roughly 20 yards. But to get 10 GeV, you need more than 20 yards in conventional technology. So let me skip this. So the experiment that we started to do with Bella is basically you take now a laser beam, and to give you a sense of what you have to do for this laser beam here, at this location, the beam is about this big. Because otherwise all of the mirrors would just be blown up first shot. So the beam is really big. Now you're going to concentrate all of that light into a tiny little spot over here with this, what we call an off-axis paraboloid mirror. Concentrate all the light. And you're going to send this from here to about the end of the room here. 14 meters is my guess, maybe this is shorter than that. Into a little tube with a diameter of about 500 micron. So you better aim well, because if you don't, that tube is gone. Trust me, we've done it. I know what I'm talking about. So you shoot a laser beam at this little tube, and this tube is made of this plasma structure. And if you do things right, you can get these high energy electron beams. So how do we make these structures? We actually have a laser machining setup where we take a sapphire block and we machine half a cylinder this way, a couple half cylinders this way, make another part, go to a microscope, align them with good precision, glue them, add a couple electrodes, add some gas, fire the discharge, and because of the current that you're pulling through this discharge, the center is warm, pushes out the plasma towards the walls, and you're creating your optical fiber, your parabolic density profile. So this is the technology that we use, and this is the channel, these are the gas slots, this is this little jet that we use. So we've been using this for 10 years now. In Bella we use these ones here, the curved slots are a bit more sophisticated, we've learned a couple things. But this is what this structure can do. You shoot in your laser beam, without this structure here, this is what it would look like coming out. With this structure, that's what it looks like. This is the laser beam. So you really keep that light concentrated over the entire distance. So we putzed around for a couple months and used 310 terawatt to reach this 4.2 GeV beam. Made quite a splash around the world. He was chosen as the top 10 American Physical Society News, top 20 Scientific American list, the NERSC 2015 Award for High Impact Scientific Achievement. This was basically all the simulations that went behind understanding this experiment. We are a very large user of our supercomputers. To model one shot, like this one here that I'm showing you, it typically takes something on the order of 500,000 to 1 million hours on our supercomputers, just to give you a sense of scale. So these are very dramatic. This takes us less than a second to produce, of course, with our experiment. It's a 50 femtosecond laser pulse, but to model it takes a lot. So this concept now can shrink the size of the accelerators back down. This is what you would have to do to 10 gigavolts, 5 football fields long. We have this lab here, that's our target chamber. That's our capillary structure. That's the size of our accelerator. And then to put our building with respect to a soccer field or a football field, that's what it looks like. So that gives you sort of the sense of scale of what the technology can do. Now, I told you that we reached 4.3 GeV, but I've been telling you about 10 GeV. So what happened? Why didn't we use all of the power? We used 310 terawatts out of the 1,300 terawatt available. Why didn't we? It's a complicated story. One is you need to further lower the density in your plasma. Why? Because the motorboat needs to be even faster so that the electrons can surf for a longer distance. But we ran into a little problem, and the little problem is that this big beam that we start with, it's concentrated down to this beautiful spot. This hole is artificial. That's a hole where the electron beam goes through. But if you look at this here, this is not what we call a Gaussian laser beam. This is what we call a flat top beam. It contains higher order modes. I don't know how much laser optics you've studied, but this is not that easy to transport in an optical fiber. And if even 1% of 1 terawatt leaks out, that's a 10 terawatt laser leaking out through the walls. That's what it does in a single shot. This is the sapphire block, and we lost control of the laser beam. Why did we lose control of the laser beam? Because we needed to run low density to get acceleration, but high density to confine the laser beam. And the two are basically fighting each other, and we cannot get to the 10 GeV doing nothing but fighting this capillary and jacking up the power. We're doing more, and this is the topic of another one of my students' PhD dissertation. We're adding another laser beam. We're adding a laser beam coming from the back here and co-propagating it with the main laser beam, and we're shooting both through this capillary. Why is that? You already have a petawatt, why are you adding another laser beam? This other laser beam here is what we call a long pulse laser. It's about 10 nanosecond long pulse. And what it does is, when it goes through the capillary, it heats it even more, but for a very short time, a few nanoseconds only. And in that time, oops, you jump up the temperature of the plasma, and it actually drills a deeper hole in the capillary, making the walls look steeper to the laser pulse. So you're artificially machining the plasma with this long pulse ahead of the short pulse coming in. And this is an ongoing experiment right now. Last week we succeeded on aligning all the beams, and in the next weeks we'll be cranking up the power to go to hopefully to 10 GeV. So you're hearing really the latest stuff from my group here. Can you delay the video actually until we get our present? So this is again machining of these plasmas. And then what we expect to see is basically a 9 GeV electron beam in a structure about this long. Again, instead of 5 football fields long. And that's what it would do. These are simulations. That's the little electron beam. To give you a sense of scale here, this is 55 micron. That beam is a few hundred nanometers in diameter. So it's an incredibly dense little electron beam. Now, coming back to this picture, let's assume that in the months to come, it may take more than a couple of weeks, but let's say in the next 6 months, we get 10 GeV. So that's check mark for our big project, but we also said we will hand off beam from one unit to the next unit, because otherwise you can't build your collider. So we embarked on this also roughly 10 years ago with a couple other students. And the idea was we build a first stage, and then a second stage, and the second stage will be powered by an independent laser pulse. So in this experiment here, this here is about 3 centimeters long, but from here to the mirror that focuses the light, in this case here, was 2 meters. You couldn't put it any closer, otherwise the mirror would blow up. So you could say, okay, what are you going to do in between? Because this beam here has to be focused, so are you going to wait another 2 meters to put your next module? If you scale that to our big laser, you would have 14 meters, your accelerator, 14 meters, the next unit. That's no longer a compact accelerator. Why is it? Because this final turning mirror has to survive the high fluence of this focused laser. It's one approach. We decided, the heck with it, let's put a mirror here that you can blow up every time. So we use, in our experiments, VHS tape. I hope there's no Betamax lovers in the audience, but VHS works great. Data tape works great. So how does that work? And when I proposed this about 10 years ago, a lot of people laughed as well, just like here. It seemed crazy. But it's what we call a plasma mirror. So the intense laser beam comes on the VHS tape. What does it do? Of course, it ionizes the VHS tape. But it happens so fast that that plasma has no time to expand. And when the plasma is dense enough, if you go back to your electromagnetics class, if a plasma is dense enough, it will actually reflect light. If it's above the critical density for this light to penetrate. And that's exactly what we did. So we built, sorry, before I do that, I'll show you what we built. So now we have a plasma mirror here, makes it everything more compact. But how about the electron beam? How do you hand off electron beam from one stage to the next stage? What do they do in conventional accelerators? They put magnets in between their RF structures. Okay, so now we're going to put magnets. Now we're talking about big real estate. So Mother Nature was kind to us, and it turns out that our capillary discharges, if you go back to Ohm's law, you have a current flowing down the bore of this capillary, typically a couple hundred amps, in something that's of a diameter of a couple hundred microns. Associated with this current, from Ampere's law, you'll get a magnetic field, an azimuthal magnetic field. This azimuthal magnetic field can focus charged particle beams. This was known from the 1950s, that you could build these. They're called active plasma lenses, but nobody had ever used them for electrons until we stumbled on it again. If you wait long enough, 25 years typically, every idea becomes a new idea. So as long as you stick around long enough, you can write a lot of new things that you remember from 25 years ago, but that the new generation doesn't remember. But it turns out it's an incredible lens. This is a 3,000 Tesla per meter lens. Why? Because it's only carrying current over a couple hundred micron. Conventional lenses are typically 50 to 100 Tesla per meter. So this is 30 times more powerful than the big magnets that people use. It's symmetric and it's tunable. So we put that in between. This is where all the action is. This is all just to split the laser beams. So we built first a little injector, then our focusing lens, then our VHS tape, then our second stage, and then our diagnostic. This was the beam, energy versus shot, just to show you that we have a stable injector. This is the lens, without lens and with lens, the way the electron beam was focused from this stage into the next stage. And this is what we saw. When the laser beam, the second laser beam, came too late, the electron beam didn't see any wave to surf on. So it didn't change its energy. When you timed them right, we were able to make them surf to higher energy on each one of these waves that the laser beam produced. And so we were able to time it in such a way that we could park the electron beam anywhere we wanted. This is the reference spectrum. Beam accelerated, beam decelerated, beam accelerated, beam decelerated. This here, to give you a sense of precision, this is of the order of 100 femtoseconds. So this is 30 micron precision that you place these electrons at. We're scaling this up to a big experiment on Bella, where we're now building a 30 centimeter unit, a focusing element, a big foil. This time it's probably not going to be VHS. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. Next unit, and we expect the first unit to go to 5 GeV, the second unit to go to 10 GeV. And we're building structures that are now this big. So that's a big experiment that we're hoping to get funding for. So what can you use these things for? I wanted to spend a few minutes on applications. This here shows you an insect that's essentially radiographed by X-rays from our accelerators. If you remember, maybe 20 minutes ago, the little movie of this density profile and then this abrupt change, when the electrons were released, if you looked closely at the electrons, they were kind of wiggling. It was like a little snake. So these electrons, when they get accelerated and if they come off axis, they actually wiggle. And that wiggle dampens down, but as it wiggles, it emits X-rays. It's like going through a series of magnets, but in our case it's an electrostatic undulator. And for free, you get X-rays coming out. And people have been taking these phase contrast images that normally you go to a big synchrotron to get this. This was done on a tabletop device. We are working on a more sophisticated device, free electron laser, as well as a gamma ray source. And the gamma ray source is basically aimed at replacing the conventional machines that are used now in our ports, where you produce an electron beam, slam it into a target, like your dental X-rays at your dental office, but instead of low energy X-rays, they're high energy gamma rays. They go through cargo, and you produce a fan beam. What we want to do is produce a very narrow energy spread gamma ray by colliding our electron beams with a laser beam. And it's like a Mack truck hitting a little fly. The photons are the little flies. They get turned around and they get a boost in energy in that process. It's called inverse Compton scattering. And you can produce from a few hundred MeV electron beam with a collision with a laser beam, you can produce these tunable X-rays. So we have a program going on right now where we are aiming to demonstrate that we can build this in a very compact setting, produce the electron beam, do the scattering, and then actually something that we call an active plasma beam dump, but I won't have time to go into it. We have another project where we are applying all of the best of our technology to produce an electron beam, send it through a permanent magnet undulator to produce an X-ray free electron laser. This is the first step towards replacing these kilometer-long machines with our technology. This is one of the most challenging experiments that we will ever do, because to come back to your point, Scott, about the quality of the electron beam, how do you do it, etc. This experiment has to have the best quality electron beam you could produce. Otherwise, it will not produce coherent X-rays like in a free electron laser. So, I wanted to end with a little bit on high average power lasers, because all of the applications from colliders to these X-ray devices, the cargo scanning, etc., they all need more than 1 pulse per second. On the colliders, you want as much power as you can to get a lot of collisions. On the cargo, you need to make sure that you produce enough photons for a container to go through. And for somebody studying flies or bone structure, etc., you want to have enough throughput that it doesn't take a whole day to take one image. So I organized a workshop with some of my colleagues back in 2013. And then we presented to the Secretary of Energy back in April this year in Washington with a colleague from Argonne National Lab, this idea of solving big problems with small accelerators. This idea of let's push the technology from the lab out into the real world, where the applications are, with the idea to bring the accelerator to the problem. Because right now it's great fun for us to develop these things, but to date there's not a single laser plasma accelerator actually working in the field. So we need to change that. So we're pushing this, and then we've also developed a national strategy for advanced accelerator development for the Department of Energy. So what's the problem with going to 1 hertz, from 1 hertz to much higher rep rate? What I'm showing you here is a commercial laser, 100 kilowatts. This is average power. Bella is 1.3 perawatts, but the average power is 40 watts. This is 100 kilowatts. And the way they do it is they take fibers, and they build this 19-inch rack-style fibers with diode pumping. They just put enough behind it. And when I started to look for this, some pictures, I said, okay, let me look for a 10 kilowatt fiber laser. So I typed in Google 10 kilowatt, and out came this thing. I said, how about 20 kilowatt? Boom. 2 of these came out. 50 kilowatt. The Daisy Chain 5. And this one here is 100 kilowatt with what we call wall plug efficiency. The power you need to produce 100 kilowatt is about 287 kilowatts. You get 100 kilowatt. What do people use these for? Machining. Every modern car is welded with lasers. And these in particular here are transported deep underground for breaking up rock in oil drilling. So they've been able to transport this enormous amount of power through optical fibers 2 miles underground. And they've saved 90% of the mechanical drill power that is needed and the wear and tear on the drill. 90%. So they're only using 10% of what they used to by adding this fiber that preheats the rock and just shatters. So can we use this technology for our stuff? No. The problem is we need peak power. So I've been working with colleagues from 2 labs. Oh, my time is up, it looks like my computer froze. Okay, there it goes. To combine, oops, sorry. I only have a couple more slides. So to combine basically Bella with its peak power with stuff like this. And so we're working with one of the defense labs, MIT Lincoln Lab, to put together a proposal to use fiber lasers to pump titanium sapphire crystal. Right now, all of these red boxes, I didn't tell you this, these are flash lamp pumped neodymium YAG lasers. They're horribly inefficient because it's a flash lamp driving a neodymium YAG crystal producing infrared light, which we frequency double to green light, which we couple into the dicep. Here it will be fiber systems powering this crystal here. And we really want to do this. And then with colleagues from Livermore and University of Michigan, we're also looking at a very different approach. One where we are going completely fiber. But the problem with fibers is they can do average power, but they can't do peak power. So how do you merge these two? So the idea that we're working on is to start with a pulse train, split the pulse train into colors, amplify each color independently, make an array of these different fibers, amplify them, combine them back down to one beam, combine all of these beams back down to one beam, and then stack all of the pulses in the pulse train on top of each other to get one giant pulse. So it sounds, again, sort of a crazy Rube Goldberg thing. But so my colleague Almantas Galvanauskas came up with this idea of taking little cavities and locking laser pulses into these little cavities by playing tricks with the light that comes in. If you imagine a laser pulse that comes into this cavity, one goes here, one goes there. Next time it comes around, this laser pulse here sees another laser pulse. If you control the amplitude and the phase of this laser pulse with respect to this one, based on the boundary conditions, the matching of electric and magnetic fields at this mirror, you can actually cancel the fields that reflect, that you can transmit all of the light. And I'm showing you this in a little animation that Almantas made. It's like Pac-Man. So here you see the beam getting split again. It's going to fill all of these cavities, and then subsequent pulses come in, and they're starting to fill all of these cavities. Here's a little bit of light dribbling out, but now no light comes out anymore, and now you're just starting to store light in this cavity. And now you're going to see the last pulse in the train basically sweeping out each one of these cavities into one giant laser pulse. And he did this in PowerPoint on a long flight, but it actually works. And I regret that I didn't show the result, but it actually works. We've stacked 81 pulses into one pulse with this technology. So very last thing, what I started with is this arthroscopic fiber laser. If you look at a tumor in the body, in this case a prostate tumor, the way it's being treated is they put, actually in this picture here, they put radioactive seeds that irradiate the prostate. What if you could produce all of the radiation very locally? This was a simulation done by colleagues from various medical systems, where they looked at the dose delivered to the prostate and everything around it. And you can see a lot of dose here. Yellow is not good, compared to our approach. So we're building a device now that can go at the end of an optical fiber. You pipe light into the optical fiber. You use special gas jet technology. I will not disclose what we use, because it's all with patents that we're working on. Special jet. Out comes a low energy electron beam of a couple mega electron volts, which is exactly the radiation energy that you need to treat cancer. Our first prototype, so the idea is to bring this into the body, bring the machine to the body. Our first prototype was a little bit big, so here is the idea: fiber optic, gas system, etc. We use our tailored density profiles. This was our first prototype. Even an elephant wouldn't like this to be put anywhere in it. But we now have a concept, and again, here, this is confidential stuff. I cannot tell you what's in here, but we now have a concept, and we're working on it, that it's actually only a couple millimeter in size, and it could actually go into the body. So this is really exciting. So let me end up with this picture here, from the founder of our lab to this big machine. And just to be provocative, I like to end with a quote from George Bernard Shaw, who says, "Those that say it cannot be done should not interrupt those that are doing it." Thank you very much. And I'm sorry for running late.
Please hold still for an announcement. I know that we have a bonus collection of students here today. I'm glad you got to see this very special talk. We have a period of time where we ask questions. I think some of the students need to leave at 6. We have the room to 5. Yes, that's right. 5. So I'm going to give you right now 60 seconds to leave the room quickly and quietly. The rest of you stay, including Physics 494 students. Please stay. The the rest of you please go. We have our usual group that will stay for questions.
Are you in a physics class? Oh, extra credit? Same. How did you do on your test?
I will do. Step outside. I'll be right out.
Not me. Anyway, see you later, Chase.
Okay. Well, we have you're right out.
That's really brilliant. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness.
Okay, with that, we have enough of this cleared out. Please
This
be
is the
quiet. If you're
hardcore.
waiting for a signal, please wait outside quietly. I'll be out. Let's turn to the room's questions for Dr. Leemans. So I had a question, which was about the I forget which D or name that you were using it, but I believe it was probably the electron dispersion afterwards, and you were saying you use a second. Is it a second capillary that you use to really, I don't know if we'd say focus that, but keep that coherent, or I know I'm using the wrong language, but I thought for a second when you were describing that you were saying you would get it for free in the first capillary, in the plasma. So I'm interested in why does it need a second stage? Was it naive to think that you could get it almost for free in the first one?
So the staging experiment is really aimed at showing that after your laser beam has depleted and it no longer can drive an X-ray, that you can hand off that electron beam to a second structure and power that structure with a fresh laser pulse. That said, we are also working on experiments to do a two-stage where the electron beam first gets prepared in the first stage, and not because of depletion reasons, but because of quality of electron beam reasons, to hand that beam off to the second structure. And in between those two structures, we would actually manipulate the electrons a bit to ensure that their quality is as good as you can get into the second stage. So that the handoff into the second module is for reasons of depletion, because you need to, just like in RF structures, you need to repeat things, and then control of the electron beam properties.
Yes. And so you have a whole different setup to that structure and that plasma in that cavity to help with the depletion and the beam control.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you very much.
And that second stage is a photonic crystal with an active gas medium to deliver the electron beam.
The second structure is it's made out of sapphire, but the reason it's made out of sapphire is not because of any other property than sapphire has a very high melting point. So when you produce a discharge in the sapphire, we've built discharges that run at 1 kilohertz. There you need to be careful with the melting of your wall. At 1 hertz, it's not such a big issue. But still, we've done tests at a kilohertz.
Wow.
Yeah. So the sapphire melts at a high enough temperature that it doesn't, under the right conditions, get eaten up by the discharge. Of course, if you crank up the current, eventually you will melt the sapphire. But that's the reason we do that. And inside that sapphire, we fill it with gas, we strike the discharge, and then we bring in the next ray. So the sapphire essentially confines the plasma. And through the thermal properties, the center is hot, the walls are cold, you get that parabolic profile cell.
I'm curious about the drilling, the hydraulic fracturing, which is currently done. Can these fracture without water?
You know, I'm not a mining expert. What I'm told is that the fiber essentially assists the mechanical drills. It's more for drilling, for deep underground drilling. But the details, I'm not sure if these are also used for fracking or not. But I don't know.
Do any of the things that you're doing to shrink the size of the accelerators help with the next linear collider type designs?
So here I want to be careful because we hope that our technology would reach the point where it has enough high average power. So the International Linear Collider.
They want to boost the power, but it takes a lot of real estate.
Exactly
and
right.
You have these issues of like where can you put something?
Exactly right. But so right now we have designs for machines that maybe one day will be competitive, but it really a lot of it hinges on the laser technology. Because if we're stuck at 1 hertz, you don't get your luminosity on your collider. You don't get enough beam power there. So you need to work on the laser technology. And then the second thing is there are a number of instabilities that could happen as the electron bunch races down the plasma. And those are instabilities that are called head-to-tail instabilities, where the electron beam would start flopping around. That's not something that you want. This is called beam breakup instabilities. In conventional accelerators, they have developed technology to control that. And so our friends in the conventional accelerator world have been over the years, first it was, we have this huge spray, not interested in producing our energy spray. They said, yeah, but you don't have any charge, and we produce enough charge. Yeah, but your emittance is bad. Now we have good emittance, and we have the short bunches, but these instabilities that they have spent decades on controlling, we will need to learn those as well. My counter-argument is the faster the repetition rate, the easier it is to do feedback. At 1 hertz, it's very difficult to do feedback. Ground motion, any of these things. So everything needs to be ratcheted up, and we still have a long ways ahead. So in the report, which is publicly available, on the National Strategy for the Advanced Accelerators, the next decade, we termed the continued discovery and invention phase. Because what we're doing really is, and most of the material that I showed you is really very current. Publications are being written, are being submitted, etc. A lot of things are being invented right now. So for that phase needs to continue for another decade. Then my dream is that we would then be put in a position, say 15 years from now, so a lot of the young guys in the room will have to take over, is to build a prototype 50 to 100 GV LINAC and use that as a big stepping stone towards a big LINAC. So you're talking about 25 years before we will be ready.
So I know with certain accelerators and colliders, they don't actually get to the speed of light, or I think it's like 70% the speed of light.
We're already at 99.99.
Really?
Yeah, these are very high velocity particles.
Wow. That was my question.
Yes.
Wait, you're thinking of heavier particles. The electrons go to the speed of light quickly.
The ions, you're absolutely right. So the ion acceleration is a whole different story. There you start with very low velocity particles. And I didn't have a chance to talk about it, but we're launching experiments in the next few weeks actually on ion acceleration with lasers.
Oh, what?
With lasers, yes. So there you have this problem of the particles are so slow initially that they dephase very quickly if your motorboat is just pulling away. Right? So you need to be clever about how am I going to bring them up to speed very gradually. So for ion acceleration, your question is a very important question. For electrons, we know how to do it.
Right. With that, we're losing the room, so I'd like us to thank our speaker again.